All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sabina Posadziejewski, and I'd like to welcome you to this webinar about government excellence and the way forward. I'm really excited to be able to share a bit about the findings about the state of government today and to discuss that state across the global perception of what's going on. And we want to invite you to speak and talk about what government excellence looks like, and then based on the different reports that are out there in the world, and then proceed to tell you about the organizational excellence framework and how we can create a system to allow us to measure our excellence and improve upon the management areas that may be considered as weak in order to achieve excellence within a government organization. And so when we talk about government, it really is about the public sector overall, where we know that a lot of the key issues is around trust today and the changes that are happening in the world. So this session is going to be about 30 to 40 minutes long in terms of presentation, and then we'll be open to a discussion. And we're going to be talking about how we can improve on the strengths and address the opportunities, to achieve that high-performing organization. In terms of who I am, my functional background is in information technology. I have been in the industry for well over 40 years, where I've worked 20 years in the private sector in a number of vertical markets, including forestry, oil and gas, software production and distribution, and also as a consultant in a number of areas. And then I joined the public sector, both at the provincial level, which is like a state level, and worked in the federal government as the chief information officer and a regional service executive for Western and Northern Canada. And most recently, I concluded my core career with the Alberta provincial government, being the sector CIO for the social sector. So this was being accountable and responsible for all the IT functions, digital transformation relative to community and social services, children's services, and also seniors and housing. And it was a significant eye-opener about the needs of citizens today, especially in our changing world as we have. So the reasons for introducing you to the Organizational Excellence Framework, OEF, as we like to shorten it, is threefold. First of all, that the government organization or the public sector should consider implementing an excellence framework because we need to increase that public trust that I mentioned earlier, and also demonstrate that senior leadership accountability for achieving results. All right, and that a government needs to be more intentional about its effectiveness and efficiency so that it is transparent to its citizens that it's serving. Also, that to share with you that there is a cost-effective and implementable solution using a framework, but putting it to action. Yes, there are models, excellent models that are used globally. However, there aren't any at this point that bring together the best of breed with specific framework and best practices to follow, allowing an assessment to occur and determining what those biggest gaps are that you can focus on. So with that, I'd like to continue here. So the agenda will speak a bit more to the context and the background supporting the purpose of this session and targeting the public sector, and also then introduce the Organizational Excellence Framework, an approach for implementation, and then a way forward that makes it much more easier to adapt and work with. So in terms of the context, why is government excellence important today? We're finding that citizen trust and engagement is actually on the decline for many governments around the world. There's so much change going on affecting the government effectiveness and efficiency. When we look at climate change, economic change coming out of COVID, and then even more significant this past year are the more notable wars and defense challenges that are occurring. We know that for government excellence, we really need to be outcomes focused and results focused to demonstrate that we are achieving things in the long run that are directly affecting our citizens. And being able to start with those outcomes in mind, as Stephen Covey had written quite a few years ago, and that still stands strong today. If we know where we're going, what we want to have, then it's going to be a lot easier to determine how to get there. We also, as an organization, the Organizational Excellence Specialists, have a strong research assessment group that has developed over the past few years a regular organizational excellence index. And with this index, it's looking at a lot of different factors across the different sectors across the globe. And we'll be going into these areas a bit more in a few minutes. And this research study, it has actually been gathering the data since 2015, and recently a new report was released for the past year. So it really speaks to the degree of which organizations have a culture of excellence, right? That's dedicated to the organization and utilizing best management practices to achieve their outcomes and demonstrate being a high-performing organization. So how do we know? So this is, again, speaking to very targeted evidence that is global research. So 3 elements here is the Social Progress Index, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development of Economic Outlook, or OECD, which presents regular updates about the state of the world, and our Global Organizational Excellence Index. So we'll look at these. I think it's really important to recognize that the Social Progress Index, which was something new for me to learn about, is very rich in its study and its analysis because it uses numerous variables and measurements, right, to profile a nation on its particular social progress. So it's not just about GDP, gross domestic output, right, or production, as the OECD does. And then, as I just mentioned, the Global Organizational Excellence Index captures that current state of excellence specifically by size, industry sector, and region, and produces and presents aggregate results for viewers or those that are looking for more detailed information. So who uses these? Well, the Social Progress Index is primarily used by leaders so that they can look more specifically at the strengths and vulnerabilities of their communities. The website link is provided here in the presentation, which I'll be sharing with the audience. And it gives a picture of how people across the world are living, what their needs are, and provides an indication of what needs to happen to improve those lives. Back in 2022, the most recent study that we reviewed for this presentation was about social progress recession coming. And I think we're seeing that significantly in a lot of the Western nations and around the world. But for particularly in North America, where we're experienced here specifically as a citizen, it is almost dire because we're not accustomed to such high prices, food scarcity, homelessness is significantly on the rise, crime, and it's just a real challenge and really difficult. And we have a lot of immigration and refugee migration into the countries for people that are trying to flee from their difficult situations. So in summary, a lot of those key influences, as I mentioned, was COVID causing that slowdown, risks of climate change, the economic turbulence, and the political change, summarizing those particular impacts. And the thing is, though, we have to be mindful that within different countries, within different areas of a country, there still are strong pockets of innovation that are occurring and people taking initiative to grow and taking risks as well to make change. So it isn't all gloom and doom, that may be suggested by some of these reports. However, overall, there are still some significant challenges, and of which I think is most obvious by many citizens across the world is a major decline in personal rights and human rights. And from some of the studies, the points that are calculated to demonstrate that decline even includes 3 of the G7 countries, which are US, the UK, and Canada. So that is significant in my mind. And so what can we do about it, right? As members that work in the public sector, want to do better, want to serve the people better. So how do we deal with that? The next resource that was used as a core reference is the OECD. And it targets being the provision of a frequent analysis. All right, and I believe it does it, every 6 months it releases a quick update of major global economic trends and prospects. And this focus is really on the gross domestic product of a nation. And what they're finding is a number of nations, like in the US and especially in Canada too, a lot of the impact on that GDP is about higher interest rates, increasing higher interest rates to try and stabilize the market and control these surging price pressures that are impacting our citizens today. And this is significant here in Canada, as well as we see housing being impacted. Being able to purchase a home is very difficult for especially young people today. Access to vehicles as well, interest rates are just so high, and it's really creating a class type of very obvious class, I think, society here in Canada. So I don't know how strong that is in other nations, the participants viewing this presentation, but we can see that the world is definitely changing. So the global OE index, which is something that I think is very significant in terms of the results that are demonstrated, is targeting leaders in every sector. So it's not just the Uber organizations, but this helps get into the practical nature of every sector to understand how they measure up to high-performing organizations and be able to do that comparison across many different factors. And the organizational excellence framework, right, that is used to perform this assessment and to create this index based on many responses to the assessment is based on the major initial excellence models that were developed in Australia, in the United States, which is called the Baldrige Award there, in Europe, the EFQM, and in Canada from the late 80s and 90s, early 90s. So we know that excellence has been a key factor for many decades now. And global research has validated that the positive relationship between implementing that excellence model does improve organizational performance, right? There is a very positive relationship there. So today, many organizations do have, many countries, a National Excellence Award, as well as we are seeing more and more recognition of other types of achievements by sector as well within particular countries. The organizational excellence framework itself brings together this best of breed of these models. So it's integrating the models, and it provides implementation guidelines for the user. So for the consumer of that model, whether it's going to be at full government level or ministry or department level, or even going down to divisional level, it helps to demonstrate, where the strengths and weaknesses are of the group and the services that are being provided, and in those key management areas. And then with that assessment tool, those results as well will support and feed into the global index as we prepare for coming years of continuous reporting and improvement. So this picture, this image represents the organizational excellence framework. It is actually a compass. So the center point is the pivot point where things can move along that circle. And we have in the smaller print the 9 key principles, where in the brown section of the circle are the key areas of management, and all supported through continuous improvement and performance measurement. So this framework is the basis of creating and generating the best practices and being able to do that assessment. And what we like to reinforce here is what's called the formula for success, which has been validated by all of this global research since 1990, and application by a number of our team members who are working with their clients over the years, implementing this particular approach to achieving excellence. So we define that formula for success as when an organization successfully implements the best management practices common to high-performing organizations, and develops that culture committed to excellence, and goes on to achieve exceptional results across a balanced system of measurement. So it's a very loaded statement, very strong statement, but it is very achievable as well if we have a common approach to working through it. This slide will speak to the overarching principles that cross into the different key management areas. Many of us who have gone into management, into full leadership, are probably very familiar with these principles along with the key management areas. But when one takes time to step back and reflect on what they actually mean, it really helps to reinforce the importance of considering these principles in the way we lead our particular organizations. When we look at that leadership involvement, it's about ensuring senior management is committed and they're engaged and they're active with the people, and being transparent and communicative with the staff in terms of together leading towards achieving the commitments that are being made. Alignment is really important. It's about that system of interrelated and interconnected work processes and all activities that have to be aligned in order to go in that same direction and move together to achieve the key objectives, and strategic direction of an organization. Focus on the customer today is so important and continues to be. We're seeing technology and innovation and, and this rapid acceptance and adoption of artificial intelligence really influencing the way we relate with the customer. But is this good? I don't know. I still like to talk to a human. And again, it is relative to trust. Do we trust what the changes are that are happening today? Are we providing prompt responses to our customers? But the thing is, we need to ensure that the people involved, in performing this work are supported, right, through reinforcement, cooperation, and teamwork, and giving those employees that opportunity to develop to their full potential. They need to believe too in what the organization is achieving. We have the prevention-based process management. All right, what does this mean? It's establishing consistency in work processes. It's minimizing risk in the way we work and developing that mindset of prevention. So there's a lot of safety factors in here and risk management considerations that need to be uh, implemented and designed right when we are talking about process management. The partnership development speaks to the relationships outside of the organization and working together for ensuring value-added relationships with those suppliers and partners, right? There is a certain degree of competition that can exist in the private sector, but in the public sector, it's really important to demonstrate that partnership. And overarching too as a continuous improvement. All right, we just got to keep getting better and improving upon ourselves and doing it faster and faster. And that's why we have to maybe strive now more towards those agile approaches for achieving that continuous improvement. And we need to be able to base it on decision making on performance measurement findings, right? We need to make sure that they're conscious changes that are being made, not just the sake of making change for change. So make sure that it's valuable. And what's very important today is societal commitment. How are we going to understand and demonstrate corporate commitment to society? And just recently, I was in session that was hosted by the global organization Fujitsu. And I thought I knew who the company was, right, from a technology perspective, but I was fascinated of their promotion of sustainability transformation. And this is how they are using technology and artificial intelligence to improve societies today and things that they are supporting different countries and jurisdictions with improving their services to citizens. So those are those 9 principles that cross into the different key management areas. So within the global index, assessment is done and by the principles by specific industry sector. So this particular chart demonstrates the ratings of which the principles are rated by 5 different by 5-point rating scale, and it's a subjective scale, and it works just from low to high, right? 1 is low, 5 is high, and we can see that based on the results and the sectors are in alphabetical order on here. Agriculture, forestry, and fishing is the lowest at 5.43. And public administration, defense, and social security are the next level up at 5.73 points. So it really demonstrates the challenges that there are some strong challenges that public administration, governments really need to focus on improving. The next slide gets into a bit more depth about those key management areas that are part of the framework. And these are things that we'll find almost parallels an organizational structure to a degree, right? We have employees, which speaks to HR. We have customers, which is like marketing. We have our leadership, and we have planning, and strategy, overarching governance. So just to quickly summarize those definitions, that governance is really key, and we need to distinguish it from leadership, because the governance is about identifying the responsibility to stakeholders, right? Putting in a governance system of accountability, acting as that model of good practice to internal and external stakeholders. However, the leadership are the people that are creating that culture committed to excellence, and they walk the talk. That is the area where strategic plans are developed. What are the goals and objectives of the organization that we're trying to achieve, the vision and that mission? And being able to work throughout the organization and be excited about communication with the staff, with the people, and work towards removing any barriers for success, right? And being very supportive within the organization. And then it's down in planning where we start getting into the details. Well, how do we deliver? How do we execute on that particular commitment by leadership, on that strategy that's been developed? So this is where the business plans are being written and operational plans, right? For aligning, always sort of that top-down alignment within an organization. And going through a regular review and maintenance process for those plans, which is really important, and communicating what those plans are and gathering feedback from our employees. The customers, critical. That's who, and in our case, in government excellence, we're serving citizens. In many cases, it's vulnerable citizens that are at the greatest risk. And this is what I learned when I was with the government of Alberta in that social sector. If we don't get our, supporting funds processed on time before the end of the month, these people will not be able to pay their rent. They won't be able to buy their food, and be able to get those basic needs met, in a timely fashion without having greater struggle. So the employees now, in this case, as we move forward, it's about the HR planning and ensuring that employees are considered, in decisions, and supports are available to them for their advancement and progress, and making sure the resources are available for them. So HR planning is really critical, that it supports what the organizational goals are. And we're finding that HR planning is starting to shift to be more skills-based versus experience-based when starting to recruit new people. And in many organizations today, there's 5 generations of people trying to work together. And that can be a challenge in itself. And how do you balance that? Because those values across those generations vary significantly. And we need to be able to balance and manage those relationships and the benefit and the offerings that each of those groups can contribute to the organization. We talk about work processes. Right now, everybody's just trying to keep up, and it seems like many are going after that shiny button. What's the new thing, flavor of the day, without taking the time to step back and consider appropriate work processes, designing, documenting, and managing those work processes for consistency. And that's where a lot of organizations will fail, because they're just moving too fast and they're not taking time. And I believe that these management concepts are still very important today, even with the rapid nature of change and innovation within the different industries and government. We still need to put the rules in place and the guardrails in place and policy of how we can move forward without creating negative impact and pushback, from society on the changes that are being implemented. Also, fairness and equity for establishing supplier and partner relationships. That's why we have competitions, in the public sector and in government, right, to demonstrate that fairness and creating those win-win relationships and leveraging the benefits of what an organization or a partner can provide for us. Being able to work together in developing those products that can perhaps further be shared for the public good and common good. Resource management, that's going into the infrastructure and the services that needs are required for operating an organization. So we need to be able to make sure that we have strong operational plans, we have disaster recovery plans in place in this area, that we are consciously planning for renewal of assets and what those assets are, and working with that. So, and within government, this is constantly changing as budgets are getting tighter, governments are selling off properties, maybe they're buying or sharing, going into 3P partnerships as well. And then finally, that continuous improvement and performance measurement really come together as key management areas because we need to measure what we're doing in order to know if we're moving forward. And when we start with an implementation, establishing that baseline for the different key management areas is so critical because then we have a target, we know where we're moving from and we know if we are actually improving and how does that look. And again, key management areas are measured within the assessment process. And in this case, the key management areas or KMAs use a 4-point scale, which are like number 1 is just beginning and we're having a good start at it, is number 2, doing well, and then 4 is high performance, which is the objective that we want to achieve. The degree to which that culture is committed to excellence and the degree to which the organization has actually implemented these best practices, right? So when we look at the key management areas based on that scale and by industry sector, again, we see that public administration, defense, and social environment has a long ways to go. There's a lot of work to be done in that particular space. So what can we do moving forward? We recommend, as the organizational excellence specialists, to conduct an environmental scan. And we've shared some resources here to help perform that scan and determine where your country, where your particular jurisdiction may rate using that SPI scorecard, checking the GDP and what has been the trend there, and also looking at our global OE index, which is available, through looking at our particular website. Then taking the opportunity to complete that self-assessment. It's really a questionnaire and it's subjective, and depending on the view, whether it's a manager level or a senior executive doing it or an employee doing it, you may find the results vary significantly than what you anticipated based on that input, right? But it's important to have that rich input come in to determine the extent to which the culture is committed to excellence. And how have those management practices been deployed? Are they as effective as they could be? So then we gather all of those ratings, right, from the individuals that have responded and really value any open-ended employee feedback. So there is an opportunity for a narrative to be shared. And it's done in a confidential manner, right, when we produce those aggregate results. But what's really great is the actual report that comes out of this is a big matrix, basically, of principles against the management areas and the best practices that will highlight, by color in a cell, if you see red, then you know that that's an area to target in on, for example, to identify a priority area for improvement, and then focus on applying standard processes to develop an action plan, right? Identifying what the goal is, who's going to do it, how long is it going to take, what does it look like, how much money is it going to cost, and setting those targets within that action plan. So this breakdown of the approach, all right, makes it fairly straightforward and tries to reduce the complexity that one may perceive is required in being able to achieve excellence within the organization. And by using this best of breed framework, right, that you've got proven best practices identified in there to establish your baseline and move forward from that. So the way forward then is what we recommend is to engage with the organizational excellence specialists, as we have members that reside across the world, across the globe, over, in Africa and Asia and Europe and in North America. and other areas. And then to use this turnkey toolkit that was developed, within the organization, so that OEF turnkey toolkit, to move forward with this particular journey. And it has to be a commitment, right? But we can start with small pieces. Not everything can be done at once. Just like any kind of model to improve in governance or planning or even doing projects, we can't necessarily do everything at once. We have to break things down. So it's really important that having that toolkit and then leveraging the access through different organizations. We have many members that are involved with quality management organizations, the ISCM Foundation, Organizational Excellence Technical Committee, Global Benchmarking Network. We have some very strong members that participate in these particular groups. And by going through the OES, we can help support an organization have access to these particular groups as well to help strengthen that performance. As we work towards concluding this session, here are some different government excellence success stories that have been achieved by applying the organizational excellence framework. Here in Alberta, the infrastructure ministry, which is responsible for roads and buildings and construction, has been demonstrated success. Also, Coral Springs jurisdiction in Florida in the States. The region of Peel was defined and successful as a smart community workplace. And we know that there are changes now happening in this region of Peel within Ontario in central Canada that could impact what their constant success is, right? And so hopefully they will continue to apply and reinforce using the framework to continuously improve with the amalgamations that are currently being planned in that area. Then next door to us in British Columbia, Dawson Creek is also another jurisdiction that has been able to demonstrate success. So what you see here are examples of different sizes of organizations. So the organizational excellence framework supports everything from a micro-sized organization with a few people all the way to very large organizations, large jurisdictions. And we have also the Singapore court system that has applied the framework, right, for demonstrating their organizational excellence and commitment to that excellence. So these are just a few of the success stories, and they continue to evolve and grow as we develop more case studies around these successes. So with this, I'd like to thank you very much for listening. And before we open up to more of a conversation, this is who I am as a certified organizational excellence specialist, licensed professional, and the website to the organizational excellence specialist's presence on the internet. And I really appreciate your time for listening to this sharing about government excellence and the way forward and how we can support you.